Bruce Bloom out of White Plains, New York. A good friend of mine works with him, and he's got some really interesting stuff. Like I've really gotten into mental health, fitness, and wellness, and all that kind of stuff. And this is Dr. Bloom's category. Doc, how are you doing? Nice to meet you.
Hey, thank you, and thank you for the handsome remark. I think the first thing you should do is go see your optometrist and get your vision checked. Or the camera's really doing
no.
some,
This,
some
no, Doc.
funky things here.
You got it. You got it going on. So you've got a practice over in White Plains, New York, correct?
Yes.
And what do you do? What's your specific?
So, it's interesting. I practice this thing called functional medicine, and it's a little bit frustrating to me that, this is an area of healthcare that has been so under publicized, and yet it's probably one of the most important first steps you can take if you're trying to keep your system working as best as it can. What people don't necessarily understand in the healthcare system that we have now, the healthcare model in America, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way, but it's a crisis disease oriented model. It's a failure based model. Health insurance is like car insurance. It covers, the crash. It doesn't cover maintenance of your vehicle. And so many people's systems are still at the point where there's injury and damage, but that damage can heal on its own if you put together the right protocols, right? Just like, if you sprained your ankle or broke your leg, the conversation, as long as it wasn't ripped into shreds and, broken into a million pieces, the conversation would be, here's the good news. You don't have to cut your leg off, or we don't have to do surgical intervention. Here's the bad news. We probably want you to not go out dancing tonight and want to reduce stress to it. So it turns out that, the human body is made up of multiple organ systems, and these systems can get injured. And rather than address the injury and give the injury a chance to recover, what we do very often is we treat the symptoms of the injury as we treat the evidence of the problem as the problem instead of giving the system a chance to recover.
That's pretty cool.
So that's functional medicine. Functional medicine, you're intervening when the system still has the ability to recover its own function. I mean, at a conference many years ago, somebody had a great line. He said, the dumbest kidneys smarter than the smartest dialysis unit. So keep your dumb kidneys. So cool. Nobody's been able to make a body part that can do exactly what your part can do. Now, thankfully, we are in an era where if those parts do wear down, they can be replaced in some way. They can be, medicine can give you things that your body can no longer do on its own. And, so it's wonderful. I'm not, again, against that in any way, shape, or form. But, the goal is to try to keep the system functioning as best as it can for as long as it can. And that's kind of what we do.
That's cool. So the idea is basically, it sounds like basically older people, like they get in their 40s and 50s and 60s. Now the body starts to deteriorate a little bit. And there's many ways you can protect your body or kind of slow down that process, right? By the food you eat, the exercise, all that stuff. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Most of the conditions that people are experiencing are verbs, not nouns, meaning that you don't have acid reflux, you're acid refluxing. You don't have irritable bowel, you're irritable bowel-ing. You don't have high cholesterol, you're high cholesterol-ing. I remember doing a presentation once to a group of physicians, and I showed a picture of a man who was very overweight, and I just said, would you all agree that this man is overweight? Of course he was. Would you agree that he's obese? Of course he was obese. Technically, he was morbidly obese. And then I showed a picture of another gentleman who was in great shape. And I said, would you say this man is overweight? No, he's not overweight, And I said, well, interestingly enough, it's the same guy. So this guy wasn't obese, he was obesing. It was he was asking his body to process fuel that his body was telling him that it couldn't process.
Yeah, that is true, right? Like we do kind of get conditioned to believe that this is who we are, right? Like somebody will say, well, I'm a night owl. Well, you're really not a night owl. It just means you're staying up too late.
Yes. People make choices, it's fine, but at the end of the day, who do you have to answer to? And you have to answer to your own body. Right. You can sit there. And by the way, there are people who can do things and their body's perfectly fine with it. Right. That's one of the challenges you work with when you're working with people is the genetic differences. The genetic differences are enormous. Right. I mean, I'm not the starting center on the New York Knicks because, genetics. I'm not 7'4". Sure. It's not that I didn't practice or work at, my game happened to be basketball, or at least I thought it was. And and I played a lot. I played in high school, I played in college and all that stuff. But, at the end of the day, I was limited by by genetics, by my physical size, so, and there wasn't a whole lot I can do to work around that. I
Right.
can just be the best I can be at, in the model that I was gifted.
Right. And a lot of it is mental too, right? Like you're really training your mind to break out of that comfort zone to say, listen, like you fall into that, okay, I'm eating to say, this is who I am. I eat, these are foods I eat. So now I'm this body type. And say, instead of saying to yourself, no, I am going to change who I am, right? And that's totally capable. But a lot of people, they just don't, like you got to train yourself to get to that point, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is based on belief systems.
Yeah.
So you can look at, my family. My father had a massive heart attack at 39 years old. We're very similar genetically. I'm 68 and I'm 175 pounds. He was 39 and 250 pounds. He had high blood pressure, he had high cholesterol, he had acid reflux, he had all these indicators that his body wasn't very happy. And he had a heart attack. Now he lived a few years after that, but he lived in a very compromised condition, and his life was very limited. But it was based on a belief system. His parents immigrated from Eastern Europe, and in Eastern Europe, people starved to death. And so it was eat, 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 and then you come to America and, you're surrounded by nothing but food and in forms that nature never intended it to be. And so they ate and they ate and they ate, and their body was, collecting all the excess of what it couldn't use.
Sure.
And eventually it infiltrated organs, damages arteries, and, then there's these negative outcomes. So it was really based on a belief system, that that you needed to eat, to eat, to eat, to eat. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've learned over the years is basically to just be an advocate for the human body. I don't honestly care what people do or don't do, but you look for evidence that the body is not happy with the way you're treating it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you try to figure out what it is that we can change that can make it happy. And it's usually some combination of addition or subtraction. It's usually saying, hey, you're giving your body too much of something that it doesn't want, can't use, can't manage, can't process, or you're not giving it enough of what it needs in order to do the job it's designed to do.
Sure.
And so if you find that right combination, then the human body will thrive,
Sure.
and it will thrive for an extended period of time.
Right.
What we see as aging is really not aging, it's deterioration or degeneration or accelerated aging.
Right. Don't you think education is a big part of it too? Just knowing which foods to eat, what to exercise to have. A lot of people just don't know, like what are trans fats, what are monounsaturated fats, right? All those things.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of it is education. And, we live in a culture where we're trying to get people to eat and drink and do things that may not be in the best interest of their bodies.
Yeah, right.
And again, I'm not making a political statement. I'm not anti anything. It's just that, so we have people who come in who are gluten sensitive. They can't digest this protein found in wheat or other grains.
Sure.
And as a result of that, not breaking down this protein, when it gets into their digestive system, it basically causes a war with their immune system, and it causes damage and complications, and some of these people just refuse to accept that reality and, continue to eat something that's, consistently bothering their body.
Yeah, I know. I mean, watch TV at night. Now they don't allow cigarette commercials anymore, right? Because they know they cause cancer and lung disease and all that kind of stuff. Right. But we're still allowed to have commercials for McDonald's and cheeseburgers and Wendy's and the French fries and all the bad foods that cause obesity and diabetes and all that. So it just doesn't.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, we know
and
why, right? We know why. Hold on. Well, we know why, right? Because it makes money, and the lobbyists now get But the reality is, it's just like when the pandemic hit, when COVID came around. If we had a healthier society, if we didn't have so many people that their immune system was compromised, it wouldn't have been as much of an issue. We wouldn't have had to have the vaccine and everything. Don't you agree?
Oh, I think what you just said was brilliant. I think that they found that more Americans died from COVID than any other country. Not that other countries didn't have the sicknesses, but more Americans died, and a lot of it was because of the fact they were dealing with compromised, dysfunctional immune systems, right? Yeah. So the question becomes, how do you end up with a dysfunctional immune system? And you end up with a dysfunctional immune system by bringing things into the body that the body doesn't like, can't use, can't process. And over time, it starts to cause some damage, and you're putting your immune system in harm's way, basically, all day long.
Right.
One of the amazing features of the human body, you're an athlete. So the human body, I used to teach anatomy and physiology in college. The human body was designed under the philosophy that the best offense is a great defense, right?
Right.
You were a hockey player. If they couldn't score on you, you couldn't lose the game,
Yep.
right?
True. Yeah.
So the body, in order to get into the human body, you have to cross a border, right? You have borders that protect you from the outside world. The goal of the body is to try to keep out the things that hurt you and to bring in the things that help you, right?
Right.
So if you want to get in, how do you get in? Well, you can try to get in through your skin, but if I put a meatball on top of your head right now, you're probably okay, right? But a tick can bite you, or a mosquito
Sure.
can bite you. You can stick yourself with a dirty needle. You can injure your skin, and things can get in that way. But your body's going to put up a pretty good defense at that site to make sure that whatever gets in doesn't, spread systemically.
Sure.
So really, under normal conditions, there's two ways you get into the human body naturally. One is through your respiratory system. Unfortunately, that's how the virus was getting in.
Yep.
So that caused, us to wear masks and to avoid, contact with people and things like that. And the respiratory system, though, it's kind of not easy system to get in. Meatballs are not going to get into your respiratory system.
Sure.
It's going to be the air, the gases that you and I breathe. And we hope that we're living in environments where our air quality isn't so bad. We hope that you're not a smoker. We hope you don't work in a coal mine, not
Yep.
or environments where you're just exposed to a lot of airborne toxicity or airborne stress. But the majority of the way to get into the human body is through your digestive system. So much so that the human body puts pretty much the majority of its immune system lining your digestive system. So if you're eating badly or not digesting things effectively, or not eating the right things, then you're actually putting a tremendous strain on your immune system, which is trying to protect you from all the particles and debris that are getting in that shouldn't get in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing, right? Like, think of the person that's sitting at home on the couch at night and watching all the commercials and all like the drug commercials and everything, and think, well, geez, it must be good because the government is allowing these commercials to be there. So I'll just go to McDonald's and I'll just go buy all these drugs to treat myself instead of. So you kind of feel for those people, right? If they don't do their homework and think for themselves.
It's not that they don't do their homework, Tom. It's just that they're not given the right information, because as you said, these are businesses. I don't begrudge any business. They're out there to make money, and they're trying to get you to purchase their product. One of the frustrations you have in the industry that I'm in functional medicine, is there's a plethora of medical research companies that are making these amazing formulas that are designed to help assist in, repairing injured systems in your body, whether it's the lining of your digestive system that's been compromised, whether it's a fatty liver, whether it's blood sugar control issues, whether it's chronic inflammatory issues, and so forth and so on. And yet these formulas are not being featured at the halftime of the Super Bowl, and because they're competing, the companies that make them are competing against, very, very large profitable corporations, and that's just the way it is, so.
But it's not the way it always was, though, Doc. I mean, when the doctors ran pharmaceutical companies, I researched this, and you go back to the Ronald Reagan era. Before him, the doctors ran the pharmaceutical companies, and they did not want advertising on TV. Why would you advertise pharmaceuticals? The doctor prescribes them. Well, now they started lobbying. The business people took over the pharmaceutical companies, and they started lobbying the politicians to have pharmaceutical commercials on TV. So it's really, because you think about it, why would you advertise a hospital or pharmaceuticals? It's something that's prescribed by a doctor. It's not like you're buying a car. It's just, to me, it's all about profit. It's really, they don't. To me, I think pharmaceutical companies don't want a healthy 70-year-old man. They want an unhealthy 65-year-old man, right, or woman, or whatever, or person, so that they can sell the product.
They just want to sell their product.
Yeah, right. So,
I don't think they care about the 65 or the 70. They care about the profitability of their product.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so I was at a conference many years ago, and one of the head of General Foods, I guess he was a VP of General Foods, was there, and he was doing a presentation. And one of the after he was done, somebody in the audience, he asked if any questions. Somebody in the audience raised their hand, and said, This guy was a, Wharton Business School graduate, very intelligent man, very well spoken, very well presented. And he said, how can you work for a company that puts out such crap, And he didn't blink. He didn't, he said, I'm a businessman, and he said, look, we're just trying to give people what they're demanding. He said, he used the cola as an example. He said, there's a $100 billion market for cola, or $1 billion market for cola. So we're going to make the best cola, best sodas that you can,
Right.
you can make. Said if there was a $100 billion market for Sprouts, we'd make the best Sprouts. So
Right.
a lot of it is, is the demand, and that's a huge
But
part.
hold on, Doc. I'm gonna disagree a little bit. So
Okay.
it really isn't the demand; it's their advertising and convincing people that this is what they want. Like if they didn't advertise cola, people wouldn't know about cola, right? They would just drink water. They drink milk, right?
Right.
Right.
It's, to your point, Tom. So one of the things that it made me realize that up until the moment I had my first child, my son, 36, 37 years ago, as soon as the nurse handed me my first child, something like came over me.
Yeah.
This
Yep.
energy came over me, and
Sure.
I knew that I had to protect this child. He was so
Yeah.
vulnerable and so, unable to defend himself at that point of his life.
Right.
And 37 years later, I still feel that way. But
Yeah.
but the point is that I recognize that my job now was to give this kid what he needed, not what he wanted,
Sure.
and hopefully to educate him so he wants what he needs. Because he wanted probably to have chocolate chip cookies for
Sure.
breakfast.
Yep.
And he wanted to stick his finger in the electric socket, and he
Yeah.
wanted, to crawl across a highway with, cars coming at 90 miles an hour,
Right.
but he didn't need that.
Right.
So to your point, it's want and need.
Right.
Right.
And from your side too, you never would have known what it's like to hold your child until you held that child, right?
Right. Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
So
Up until that moment, I couldn't imagine
Right.
the feeling that I could actually have that type of feeling.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing. Yeah. So when somebody comes into your office, Doc, obviously like you're talking here, it's not just one size fits all. Like you do a full
Well, no,
analysis.
that's the uniqueness of my office. It's every person who comes in is an experiment of one. They're the experiment.
Right. Right.
So, going back to functional medicine or going back to healthcare, you're a hockey player. In order to become a hockey player, you had to be able to do the fundamentals, right? You had to be able to skate. You had to be able to stick handle. You have to be able to do all these things. You couldn't just not do those things and then show up and play professional hockey.
Yep.
So you had to work and work and work on the fundamentals. One of the frustrations from my end is when you look at the human body and you say, what's the basic function of the human body? What's its most important goal? Its most important goals are, number one, to create energy, because energy is life. The moment you can't do that, the game's over, right?
Right.
And number two, the second most important goal is to get rid of waste, get rid of things that accumulate that are not good for you, right?
Sure.
So the frustration from my end is that we don't assess people from that lens. We don't see how efficient they are at converting fuel into energy, and we don't measure how efficient they are at clearing out waste. We see the evidence of that,
Right.
and the evidence could be, weight gain, could be inflammation, could be, particles and debris that you can't get rid of that circulate in the body create injury. So now you have an activated immune system. Eventually some of those particles can cross the blood-brain barrier and start affecting cognitive function and causing damage to, neurons. And it's just incredible to me that we've overlooked the most basic aspect of human physiology.
Sure.
And so when people come into my office, that's the starting point. We try to see how efficient you are at performing those two
And
functions.
how do you do that, Doc?
Well, one way is by looking at the composition of somebody's weight. So you step on a scale, I would guarantee, I shouldn't say this, I don't know this for a fact, but I work with a lot of men, athletes who come in and they're big guys,
Yep.
right? And they step on the scale and let's say they weigh 275 pounds, right? Now, that person is being compared statistically to it's called a BMI,
Yep.
is being compared to a statistical man of that same height and that same age, right?
Right.
Now, we have a technology that can break your weight down into compartments so we can see how much of that weight is muscle and bone and fat and water, Now, a lot of these people, their percent body fat, they're athletes. Their percent body fat is very
Right.
low. They
Right.
just have a huge frame and they have a lot of muscle mass.
Right.
Right.
This happens to me when I go to get life insurance. They put you in a category based on my weight that it tells me I'm obese. And I say, I'm not obese. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then people don't understand the basics that that's statistical medicine.
Right.
Statistical medicine is grade. The average grade on I used to teach. The average grade on a test was an 80, but nobody got an 80.
Right.
Half the class got 100, the other half the class got a 60.
Sure.
So now I'm supposed to teach to the 80.
Right.
It's kind of silly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you going to an optometrist and him giving you a statistical pair of corrective lenses based on the average sight
Sure.
ability
Sure.
of men your age and your height. And when half the population is nearsighted and half the population is farsighted,
Right.
So what percentage of the people do you think it's going to help? It's going to help maybe 10% of the population, right? So
Yeah.
90% of the population are not going to be helped by that statistical
Sure.
pair of corrective lenses.
Yeah,
Right.
makes sense.
The
Yeah.
same thing when people come up with these diets. They say, "Oh, this diet worked for me." Well, great. I'm glad it worked for you, but you're you.
Yeah.
And by the way, how do you know it worked? Based on maybe the scale went down, but maybe you lost water, maybe you
Yeah.
lost muscle, maybe
Yeah.
you lost
Yeah.
energy.
Totally.
We have the ability to measure these things. And it's very frustrating on my end that you have a technology that can give you this very interesting information that's being so underutilized in our
Right.
healthcare system.
Yeah.
And the reason it's being underutilized is not because of the validity of the technology, it's because it's not covered by insurance.
Yeah.
Because
Totally.
it doesn't diagnose anything.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So one of the ways you can see how a metabolism is working is by what your body's doing with what you're bringing into your body.
Sure.
When they say people are obese or overweight, that's a huge marker because that's telling you that you're bringing in things to your body that your body can't use, can't
Right.
process, or can't get rid of. Well, where are those things going to go, Tommy? They're going to go into storage. If you're lucky, they're going to go into fat stores, or you're going to retain water. And you can see that. You can
Right.
see the human body start to collect things that it shouldn't collect.
Right.
Should you wait until an organ has become strangled by that, or
Right.
arteries have become clogged? No, I mean, it's silly. You should intervene early enough in the process. So
Right.
that's one of the tests that we do. We do another test that's called heart rate variability testing, which measures the rhythm of your heartbeat. So the rhythm of your heartbeat is actually, your heart is one of those amazingly complicated organs. And what's really amazingly unique about the heart is it has its own brain. It has its own electrical system.
Sure.
Your heart beats on its own. It does not need anybody to tell it to beat. But there's a part of your brain that you have no conscious control over called your autonomic nervous system that actually controls the rhythm of your heartbeat.
Oh.
So, sometimes you need to speed up because you're being chased by a tiger. Sometimes you need to slow down because you're not being chased by a tiger. So it's kind of like you driving a car. There's a gas pedal and a brake. They're opposites of each other, but they're there to regulate things, right?
Sure.
Too much, too little becomes the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So heart rate variability testing can tell us, overall how fit you are, your fitness levels, but it can also tell us how stressed your body is, right? Now, again, the problem with this technology, it's not telling you why, it's telling you what.
Right.
But if you see a system that's saying, hey, I'm not so happy here, then that's a great conversation starter. Let's try to figure out how we can make the system happen.
Right. So in that case, do you use medicine to do that, or do you try to stay away from it?
Unfortunately, people do that, but you don't have to do that.
Right.
I mean, you can try to figure out what's stressing the body.
Gotcha.
It could be that you're not getting enough sleep. It could be that, you're not sleeping, properly, and you're not getting enough recovery from sleep. It could be that you're not exercising. You talk about the person who sits around watching TV all night long. Well, that person also is probably getting up in the morning, taking, driving or taking a train or something to work,
Sure.
Sitting at work all day long. Not many of us are, professional hockey players as our career. So, we're relatively sedentary. The worst thing you can do to the human body, two worst things. Well, one is not get effective sleep. And number two is don't move it.
I know. Sitting is quitting, right, Doc? Sitting is quitting.
It's
Yeah.
The body was designed for motion. All of its circulatory system. You have your cardiovascular system, which has a pump. It's a famous pump called your heart. But it certainly helps when you move. But secondly, you have another backup circulatory system that is very underpublicized. It's called your lymphatic system, and it doesn't have a pump. And lymphatic system is sort of like the sewer system of the human body, the waste removal system. But its pump is muscles. And it's the muscles of motion. So when you're moving and you're pumping those muscles, you're helping circulate. The more you help circulate, the more you can send things to your kidneys as a filter to get rid of things, or to your liver to clear stuff out. It just helps your body.
Yeah, it does, right? As you know, the biggest organ on your body is your skin. And I've noticed like the people, right? So the people that really stay healthy and everything, they look more youthful because their skin is better, right? They take cold showers, they eat better foods, all those different
But the skin, the external skin reflects internal health.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's the emotional and psychological part of it too, right? That you now feel better. Yeah, you feel better about yourself. So, but Doc, let me see. So you have a patient come in, you do all these tests on them, you say, okay, here's what you need to do. Here's the foods you need to eat. Here's the exercise you need to do. It's still up to them to do it, right? There's mental, right?
Yeah, I will put together a specific plan. I will tell you, what to do when you first get up in the morning, what your breakfast should be, what your lunch should be, what your snacks should be, what your dinner should be, what supplements you should take if you need. I will put together a plan. But like anything else, Tom, it's my opinion at that point, right? I'm giving you my opinion. Now, I've been doing this for 40 years, so maybe I know a little bit more today than I did 40 years ago, but it's still an opinion. I always, used to laugh when, you went to a doctor and, they gave you a diagnosis and then you didn't like the diagnosis. So you went to another doctor and it's called the second opinion, right? What does it mean about the first one? It just means the first one was the first opinion, right?
Right.
So I give you my opinion. I think this is what I think you should do. But more importantly, we now have tested your body and now we can reference your body against itself. That's the beauty of functional medicine. And that's the beauty of these technologies, because if you make these changes, you can see actually how your body is responding. Now, if responding the way we hope it will respond, then that's wonderful. Then, we have a kumbaya moment. We pat each other on the back and we say, okay, we got your body moving in the direction we want it to go. If it's not, then we come up with plan B, or maybe it's just that you're not really following the plan, the way we had outlined it to be. So, the goal here is, again, I'm just an advocate for the human body. Honestly, I don't care what people do or don't do, but if there's evidence that your system is not happy with the way you're treating it, what are you going to wait for? Are you going to wait until the system breaks?
Sure.
Or are you going to, or are you going to try to be, your body's best friend or your body's advocate, right? And you do that, right? You do that with your body. You're 64 years old and you're still very active physically. You're still healthy. You're still, you take, I'm assuming that you take responsibility for your health.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me, that I don't want to sit around and just say that when I get to be 50 pounds overweight and I've got some heart condition, that okay, I should have done something about it. And part of it is too with the mental health for me too. My mother had some mental health issues. I've had multiple concussions. My father had dementia. So I think to myself, there's things I can do to slow down the aging process of my brain, like regenerating cells by fasting and all those, and the foods I eat. So I think, okay, well, if it doesn't work, well, I really haven't hurt myself. What have I lost? But by trying to be healthy all the time. So even exercising my brain, like I find I try to read more, study more, learn things more all the time. And I just believe if you're going to exercise your body, you put better foods in your body and you exercise. You want your body to be better. I think it's the same thing with your mind, right? That you can exercise.
Well, the human brain is, probably the primary organ in the human body. Everybody else around there is really designed to protect your brain, because if your brain fails, Tom, the game's over, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have kidneys, it doesn't matter if you have muscles. So, the human brain is one of those organs that's, again, designed under the philosophy that the best offense is a great defense. Let's protect the crap out of it. Let's encase it in bone. Let's wrap it in these ridiculously powerful coverings. The outer covering called the dura mater, which in Latin means tough mother.
What is that? What is it again, Doc? What's that?
It means tough mother.
What's that called? What's that word?
The dura mater, the covering of the brain.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
It's it has multiple layers of protection, and the final layer of protection is it has a special series of blood vessels that communicate it, that have a barrier called the blood-brain barrier that do not let things through that could potentially hurt your brain, right?
Sure. Wow.
So because your brain is really made up of tissue that doesn't have a really great defense ability. It's not the most defensive organ. It can defend itself a little bit, but typically, brain cells can't reproduce. They're such highly specialized cells that because of their high specialization, they can't reproduce, they can't protect themselves, they can't feed themselves. So
So,
you
Doc,
need.
Doc, when you go into fasting and you get that stage where you're at autophagy, are the brain cells regenerating like your body cells are, or is that not accurate?
Uh, it's hard for a brain cell to regenerate.
Okay, okay, all right.
I mean, you can. Somebody once asked me a very interesting question when I was teaching anatomy and physiology, and we had just gone over. We were talking about the neurological system, and somebody said, is it true that you use about 10% of the function or potential
Yeah,
of your brain?
good one. I like this.
And the answer is probably, I mean, but what's even more true is you use about 10% of the function of every system in your body.
Right. Yeah, but isn't it true though that we use 100% of the brain 100% of the time, but we actually only maybe utilize the 10% of the brain. The brain's always functioning.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, it's always functioning, but it's not functioning. Not 100% of the neurons are active 100% of the time.
Oh, is that true? See, I was under the impression that the 100% of the neurons are activated 100% of the time, but maybe we just utilize 10% of those.
I think that's
Is that
probably
okay.
more accurate description.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's an interesting statement too that sometimes people bring up just in general. So Danny's used the example of cancer here. When someone falls perfect from day to day, how frustrating is it when that person developed cancer? So people will say, okay, this guy worked out all the time, he's in great shape, and then he died of a heart attack. Well, those are two different issues, right? I mean, if you're going to die, or if you get cancer, that's not because of your lifestyle, but maybe it is if you smoke cigarettes or whatever. But the point is still, like, people want to make the excuse, well, why would I work out? This guy worked out all the time and then he died of cancer. Well, that's just not, it doesn't work that way. It's like, you can still be healthy and fight off other diseases and other things. Maybe you would have died from something else, right?
Well, there's a lot of variables here, and so one of the frustrations in the healthcare model is by the time you pick up the evidence of the problem, the problem is past the point of repair. Totally. So talking about like neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, one of the things they noted was, by the time you're diagnosed with it, there's really not a lot you can do to help that person get better. I mean, if you look at, statistics, you say, what's the probability of, helping that person through intervention? And the success rate in managing those conditions is, close to 0%. Right. When something's close to 0%, this is not picking on anybody, but you would say that maybe the algorithm you're using to manage this condition maybe is wrong, right? Yeah. And so what's the algorithm based on? Well, it's based on the observation in the brain of Alzheimer's patients that there's a buildup of plaque. And this plaque has a name. It's called beta amyloid or tau fibrils, whatever you want to call it. And so naturally, if you see that, you would say, wow, if there's something we can do to break up this plaque, we should be able to improve cognitive function. Okay. And there's been some pharmaceutical interventions that have reduced the buildup of plaque without the success that everybody was expecting. Right. And in some cases, actually, things got worse. So then the question becomes, well, why? Well, one of the things that they observed is that this plaque that's forming is actually forming to protect the brain from things that are hurting it. Right. It's kind of like the callus on your hand. Right. Callus on your hand is not the problem. It's the reaction to the stress of that tissue, right?
Sure.
So then the question becomes, well, if that's the case, then what's stressing that tissue? And when you start looking at the fluid of Alzheimer's patients, the actual fluid, you start to see particles and debris and things that got in that crossed that blood-brain barrier that should not have crossed. And number one on the list is sugars. So some people actually call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, so sugars that are not regulated correctly can cause, insult and damage to every system in the body, including the brain. But there are other things. It could be heavy metals. It could be bacteria. It could be viruses. So, the human body is really designed to try. So I'm sorry, let's take a step backwards here. So basically what the conclusion is that these conditions are the breakdown of the barriers and borders and filters that the body uses to protect the brain that ultimately allow things to get through that shouldn't get through.
Sure. Interesting. Here's an interesting question right here. Brian Duffy, if we could recommend only one change to a patient for bettering their well-being, what would you pick? Tough question.
One, huh?
So you got things like sleep, exercise, diet.
Make sure I would say either or, sleep or exercise.
Right. I agree. I agree totally. And here's and this is an interesting topic right here. So you mentioned that the near 0% should we still have hope? Yes. See, I'm a huge believer that I believe in the science totally. I believe in the science about sleep, the science, but I also believe in the human spirit too. Like there's a story, I keep forgetting his name. I do a show on Thursdays with Rich Caberti, and he tells me about the story. There's a gentleman who's kind of famous now. Apparently, he got hit by a truck riding a bicycle, and was told that he was paralyzed and never walk again. But his story is that he stayed in the hospital, and he said he just kept telling himself every day that he was going to walk, despite what the doctor said to him, and he ultimately walked. Now, this is the story, but I do believe in that human spirit, right? That there's a lot of cases where if you're just constantly telling yourself you can't do it, then you won't be able to do it. But if you tell yourself you can, you increase your chances of being able to get it done. I know that isn't really scientific, but I really do believe in the
Well,
human
maybe
spirit.
that is scientific, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
why is, first of all, a lot of people, science is very misunderstood.
Yeah.
Science is just a method that's used to give you degrees of accuracy about something that you don't know anything about, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
But, like any method, it's only based on it's limited by the amount of variability,
Sure.
right? So when you're dealing with human beings and science, you can do statistical science, and that's great. But statistical science doesn't give you, the individual, the information you need going forward,
Sure.
right?
Right. Sure.
So because there's too many variables. What are the variables? Well, certainly there's genetics.
Yeah.
We're all different. And look, there are people who are, you can just look at, skin color as an example. There are people
Sure.
who are very light skinned. If you say the word sun to them, they get burned. And there are people who are dark skinned who can actually go out in the sun, and and the pigments in their skin can protect them from the damaging effects of ultraviolet radiation.
Right.
By the way, that's not right or wrong or good or bad. But if you're light skinned, I wouldn't necessarily hire you as a professional sunbather in the tropics. I
That's
mean,
true.
that might not be the best environment for you.
Right.
There's size differences. You and I, our eyes we have a pair of eyes, but we don't see the same. Well, we have stomachs that don't work the same. We have livers that don't work the same. We have muscles that don't work the same as somebody else's. We have brains that don't work the same as somebody else's.
Sure.
So there's the genetic reality, and now there's this whole new science built around epigenetics. I don't know if you heard that concept, but
no.
So it's not just the genes; it's your ability to access those genes, right? So it turns out that there are these special proteins, or they're called epigenes, outside the gene that determines if we're going to allow information to that gene, right?
Wow.
So you can take identical twins who have the exact same, genetic makeup, and you put them in different environments, and they're going to have different expressions because of how the environment communicates to the epigenes, which silences a gene on one and activates a gene on another, right?
Wow. Wow.
And that's a very complicated science now of epigenetics. And then, you have age as a factor.
Sure.
Your body's different at 64 years old than it was at 24 years old.
It's better, Doc. It's better.
I hope so. Yeah.
Where are you at with hypnotism or meditation in all this?
I think that's one of those things where if you have a system on overload, especially a brain, it's a great way of giving this organ a chance to rest and recover.
Sure.
Think about what people are doing every minute of every day. They're constantly bringing in information, right?
Sure. Yep.
Sensory stimulation to this organ that has to process it. Well, this organ gets tired, just like anybody else. It gets tired. And one of the symptoms of a tired brain is the craving of carbohydrates, because your brain happens to be a sugar-dependent organ, sugar and oxygen. And so, when it's tired, you feel like you need more sugars because your brain is tired. But it's not that you need more sugars. You need to rest your brain.
Oh, okay. Interesting. How about testosterone replacement?
I'm a huge fan of replacing something that you're not making anymore.
Right. So it depends on who you are, right? If you get tested,
it depends on who you are. It depends on your ability. Testosterone, whether you realize it or not, testosterone is a cholesterol-based hormone.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So what does that mean? It means it's made from cholesterol, which is a fat.
Right. Oh.
Now, the human body was designed to it's a water transportation system, and and your kidneys are water-based filters, and fats and water don't mix. So now, if you're making testosterone, first of all, you need cholesterol as its primary ingredient.
Right.
It's now a fat. Now you have to transport it through water. So you got to call up a carrier, right?
Well,
That carrier happens to be called sex hormone binding globulin. That's the name, right? And it takes it to where it needs to go. And then after it does its job, which is to, instruct cells on what to do. Now you have to get rid of it. Well, you can't send it to your kidneys to get rid of it because it's a fat and your kidneys are water-based filters. So you have to send it back to your liver, and your liver has to figure out how to break it down.
wow, interesting. That's pretty cool, Doc.
Now, if you have a liver that's on overload and it can't process what you're bringing in, it can't regulate fats effectively,
right.
then this potentially could be really a dangerous substance. It could be a carcinogen to you.
So extra testosterone that you put in your body could be bad for you.
Oh, for some, yeah. For some.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I can't say who it is. It's a person that's pretty high up in the sports world and had dealt with a lot of the drug issues in the past, and was at a presentation he put on. He said, listen, I can't say this publicly because there's really no studies to back this up, and it's controversial, but he really believed that testosterone is something that everybody should do as they got older. Well, not everybody. Everybody, if they got their blood levels tested and their testosterone was below a certain level, that testosterone was actually good for them. That was his opinion, but yeah.
You can make that argument, if you want to. The body's not one-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional.
Yeah, right.
So, you may be stimulating one thing here, but you may be creating another problem there.
Yeah.
So, one of the reasons why nature's pretty intelligent, I believe. And, one of the things that happens to men as they get older is their testosterone levels do start to decline a little bit.
Right.
It doesn't stop, but it declines a little bit.
Right.
Maybe there's a reason for it, because testosterone stimulates cells to become active, right?
Right.
As you get older, what are the chances that some of your cells that you have are now cancer cells?
Right.
So you basically are putting your body at risk by stimulating, you're stimulating good cells, but you're also potentially stimulating cancer cells.
Is that the case with testosterone or more with the HGH?
HGH is
like HGH is a human growth hormone. So everything.
Yeah, but it's a protein. It's not a fat, so it doesn't stay in your system that long. And
okay.
So I don't think that's really as much of a problem as testosterone, because it can build up and stay in your system. It has to be broken down because it's a fat, because it's a cholesterol-based hormone.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, because I'm in the gym a lot. There's a lot of guys that they sell testosterone right in the gym. Some of these guys, so they're all pumped up about it. Doc, this has been fantastic. I'd like to do this more often. So how would people get a hold of you if they want to talk to you or come in and see you?
Well, I do have a website. My office name is Bloom Metabolic Insights, and that's kind of what we do. We give you insights into how we can make your metabolism work as best as it possibly can.
Right.
It turns out that process is complicated because it involves, the interaction of every major system in your body. So, we make sure that we do a system by system analysis. So it's Bloom Metabolic Insights. My phone number is 914-949-6009. And, my email address, again, if you get on my website, all the information is there.
Very good. Excellent, Doc. That's fantastic. Let's do this more often. We should do this every couple of weeks to talk about this and get
Hey, that'd be great, Tom. I really appreciate it. You're a very easy guy to talk to and with, and very insightful yourself.
Yeah, I've learned that's Doc. Thank you for saying that. I've learned to learn more. The pandemic for me, as much as been bad for so many people and people lost their lives, it was fantastic for me because I was at home more. Thinking, okay, I realized I didn't know certain things about my diet, my health, and talking to people like yourself all the time too. So this has been fantastic. We'll do this every couple of weeks, everybody. So, Doc, great to see you. Nice to meet you.
Hey, thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it.
All right, see you, everybody.
You take care. Thanks.